Hey, folks, welcome to the SquadCast. I hope you are ready for a great night tonight. We are going to have some interesting guests. I want to apologize. Mike is not here tonight. We think we figured out some of his technical problems, and he's got some other things going on, but he will be back soon. I think next week we're going to have a really special SquadCast. So stay tuned to details for that. We are going to close out the year pretty good fashion for that. So that's important. I want to let you know what's going on tonight. First, we do have a special guest that we're going to have come in early, and he's going to stay with us and be our guest co-host tonight, David Crispino, who's got a Kickstarter going right now that is pretty exciting. We're going to talk to him about that. And then later on in a little bit, we're going to have Ron Randall, which I'm sure is why everybody's here. Ron's going to be here in about 20 minutes or so. So if you want to pop out and come back, or if you want to stay and listen to what we have to say, it's going to be some good stuff. First of all, tomorrow is New Comic Book Day, which is great. We love New Comic Book Wednesday. And there's a book that's coming out tomorrow that I want to highlight, and that is called Skeeters. Let's see if I can make this a little bigger for you. Skeeters is from Mad Cave. The writers are Bob France and Kevin Cuff. Art by Kelly Williams. I love this book. I've read it a couple weeks ago, or maybe a month ago by now, a little over that. But it is a horror, catastrophe book. It is Skeeters as in the insect variety, and they are dangerous, to say the least. I'm really excited about it. I hope everybody reads it. It's from Mad Cave, and we're huge Mad Cave fans here. We think they're doing a lot of really good things, and this is another example of it. This book is really good. We can't wait to get issue 2 when it comes out, so I want to highlight that book as something that's coming. There's some other books that are on this list this week. This one is kind of interesting too, and I want to say because this is highlighted as a Sentry. Apparently, the Sentry is dead, and other people have his memories and powers, and they're supposed to figure out what this means. Who will become the new Sentry? And apparently, Robert is also a fan of Skeeters, and we are as well. Thanks, Robert, for watching. Hope everybody can hear me, and let me know if you can't, because I always get freaked out about this. This book is kind of cool, and it's the only next one I want to highlight, because I like the concept of a mystery. There's something that's happening that from the beginning we're apparently not aware of, and I like that. I like the concept of a mystery placed in a superhero space, and that's kind of what I said in the new number ones, which is available right now on popculturesquad.com. The most recent article is the new number ones for this week. We've been doing them weekly for the past several months, and I like it better. I hope people enjoy it. Gives me a chance to kind of hit things as they come out and make sure we're on target. Publishing is never a science that you can count on. But thanks, Robert, for the audio check. Appreciate it. I'm going to pull this out, and I am going to bring in my friend here, David Crispino, and we're going to start talking about his stuff. So, hey, David, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I am good. I'm really glad you did this. I'm really glad you joined us.
I'm glad that you invited me.
Before we get to the Kickstarter, how long have you been doing this? How long have you been making comics? Because this is your 10th Kickstarter.
My 10th Kickstarter.
How about that?
How about it?
Yeah.
It's sweaty for sure. There's Kevin.
Kevin, you just missed. We were just highlighting Skeeters. Skeeters is coming out this week. So
I loved it too. I loved it too. I love Skeeters as well. Bob and I give thumbs up.
We definitely. Everybody should check it out. So, 10th Kickstarter, right? When was the first one?
I think 2012.
That's a solid decade.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Around 2012 was Blood and Time, which was like my first kind of foray into comics, and that was my horror western about like yeah, let's see, yes, 2012. So yeah, that was like my first book, horror western. I was trying to capture like Swamp Thingy, Frankenstein's monster in the Old West, put together by Native Americans to combat like encroaching colonization. And so like white men were basically possessed by the Wendigo, and they were, you know, greed and just trying to like colonize the land and take the land and all the war and like I had this whole plan of doing other like sort of like a Four Horsemen type deal, but yeah, they created like a Swamp Thingy kind of Frankenstein's monster guy to combat, and that was my first comic in 2012. Yes, with
That's awesome.
My friend John Warren, and yeah, and then I just kept going. I was a retailer at Collector's Corner, and I had owned a shop in Montana as well for 3 years, and then
I saw that in your bio. It's a little odd.
It is. So yeah, went out there for love, and it didn't work out, and neither did the comic shop. So I came back home,
and you found love.
And I found love, and
there
I've been with the same woman for just about as long as I've been writing comics. Actually, longer. Fantastic. Yes.
Right. Well, I want to show the trailer to this, and then we can talk about Taft Sturgeon.
Yeah.
Okay. Hang on. We want to play this from the beginning.
Hi, I'm David Crispino, and welcome to the Kickstarter campaign for Taft Sturgeon Holiday in the Stars. It's a cosmic Christmas odyssey.
The Christmas season is in full swing throughout the galaxy, and Taft Sturgeon, Shanice, and Gino are back in this all-new sci-fi holiday adventure. This time, they're hot on the trail of a sinister toy salesman who's peddling his holiday-garbed accomplices to unsuspecting families. But when the toys fight back and the bad guys get away, Taft is left feeling like a failure. Just when it seems like the holiday season is at its darkest, Taft is contacted by a conniving robotics tycoon who wishes to replicate him with robotic Galvatrons. Taft refuses, setting into motion the villain's plan B: get rid of Taft and continue with plan A. Rocketed through a nearby black hole, Taft fortuitously crashes at the North Pole.
Hey, this is Tony Gregori, artist and co-creator of Taft Sturgeon. Along with my pal and brother David Crispino, we've crafted a 140-page sci-fi holiday graphic novel for you guys. Please check it out and support us if you can. It's a fun book, and it'll keep you warm this holiday season. Okay. Happy holidays, everybody.
Taft Sturgeon, Holiday in the Stars, is a 140-page sci-fi Christmas adventure brought to you by David Crispino and Tony Gregori, with the incredible team of Simon Goff, Guillermo Mendez, Taylor Esposito, Jimmy George, and Rafer Roberts.
That's something. It looks great, man. I'm serious. It looks really good. All right. So hey, Robert's definitely in the chat. We're excited about Robert. So Taft Sturgeon, where does he come from?
My love of John Candy and Tony's love of John Candy as well, but and wanting to. Yeah, and wanting to tell like pulpy sci-fi adventure stories. We were trying to do something, you know, we were given the opportunity to be in the back of Shudder from Layla Del Duca and Joe Keating. And we thought that it would be cool to like go back to sort of like a pulp science fiction, you know, that sort of era of comics where we were just doing a serialized thing. And so we were trying to tell, you know, 5 to 6 page quick shorts that led into the Taft Sturgeon story. And so we did it. And we just thought like, what about like an Uncle Buck in space? Like, what about this? What about that? And so we just tried to get as weird as possible with it, like giant cosmic babies and incubator cities and weird looking alien characters, but also like try to lean towards the whole, like, I guess like Superman aspirations, where it's just like, this is a person who like wants to do good and like tries to do his best in every situation. And like sometimes when the situation gets frustrating to him, like he's willing to go above and beyond and like sacrifice himself and to get the job done and done well.
That's cool. That's very cool. So just to set the expectation for backers and what you did that in the back of Shudder. It was collected, and you did a collected Kickstarter edition of it. And then you've done other stuff. A lot of the other stuff hasn't necessarily been Taft Sturgeon. Now you've come back to Taft Sturgeon for 140 pages in space at Christmas.
Yeah.
You can say, yeah.
So
That's right.
We did that. And we're doing that. 120 pages have been drawn. Half the book has been colored. Most of the book has been lettered.
You have some great talent helping you out with this. Simon Goff and Taylor and Rafer's Pros Pro. Getting him involved is great.
And just I mean, it's a showcase of talent. Like I think I can't complain one bit about my team. I think these people make me look great, and they do great work, and I have nothing but respect for them. And they have all shown up, and they have all like done their best, and I appreciate that, especially for this like weird book, this like weird kind of. I mean, it is a pet project, and what are all independent books but pet projects? So it's like, this is something, we decided to do a 140-page graphic novel just because, like, we wanted to do a Christmas story. We love Christmas. We both lost quite a bit of important people in our lives. And so we were trying to honor them in a way that, that we could channel that those good vibes, those good feelings. And like, I mean, like the other thing, like the Taft Sturgeon character also is like John Candy, but it's also like, I have an affinity for like big men because my dad was a big man. He was like 6'4", 300 pounds. John Candy's that. Santa Claus is that. So yeah, we did all that. And so we wanted to explore how Christmas influenced other people, and so that's why like our villain is like sort of a corporate robotics engineer and manufacturer, and he wants to like tap into the Christmas spirit and commodify kindness and goodwill by creating like facsimiles of Taft Sturgeon, but in reality he's like doing it in a malicious way. And Taft on the other side of the spectrum is like excited about kindness and caring and giving and like this, that, and the other. And like, he's that all year round, but like during this time of the season, he starts to feel low because of like how he felt like maybe he didn't do enough, or maybe he lost a couple cases and things like that. So that's where we are.
It's great. I can't recommend it more. I'm very excited about it. I'm just saying, like, Holiday in the Stars, it's perfect. It's the perfect Kickstarter for this time of year. I'm gonna, if you look in the comments, there's a link to the Kickstarter campaign. Just go there, and everybody can go ahead and support it, back it. Some great people out here doing stuff. I think it's really, really fun. And so what I want to talk to you about, and we're going to talk about this with Ron, who we're going to get to very shortly, folks. He is in the green room, so we're going to get to him shortly. But
sorry to bother everybody.
No, yeah, exactly. No, we know who the star is, right? Your decision to go ahead and make comics on your own through Kickstarter or through independent, being part of other people's. What gave you that? What is it that pushes you forward through there? Because it's not the glamorous life of a comic book superstar that we all had when we were like, oh, maybe I can do this, right? it's a lot of work for not a lot of trinkets. What pushes you forward through that? What is it about comics that you want to keep doing this?
Yeah, some say not a lot. I say negative a lot,
Negative a lot.
negative a lot, in the red a lot.
Okay.
Stupidity,
Okay.
being
You can be. Go
being
ahead.
stubborn. Yeah, I mean, this is like my chosen creative output. Like, I love comics. We're all here talking about comics for a reason. Like, I grew up with comics. I learned how to read with comics. I learned like how to be a better human being through consuming comics. And which of course led me to like literature, music, and the arts, and like how I appreciate the medium as a whole. And I think, I always say, I think it was like Neil Adams who's like, it's the marriage of like a great storyteller and a great artist, a great visual artist, and you like put them together and like you have one of the best mediums. And so with why I make comics, I think it's just I don't know, man. Yeah, like there's something about collaborate. There's also something about collaboration, and coming from like a blue collar background, like, and I'm still landscaping and hardscaping, but like worked in the kitchens, worked in retail, worked in demolition, and there's something about comics that at the end of the day, it is still like nuts and bolts and creativity. It is still like getting a team together and doing your part, and then managing it all, and like having this relationship, and then creating this piece of art together, which I think is really cool. And I think, yeah, I just think like if you have people who believe in you and want to create with you, like, you don't really want to stop. It's infectious.
Yeah.
And
good.
and it's like inspiring. So yeah. And sometimes people just want to get paid, and I pay Patriots.
Sure. That's true. That's true too. All right. So I want to remind everybody, Kickstarter.com, it's called Taft Sturgeon Holiday in the Stars. Taft as in the president, sturgeon as in the fish.
Yes.
Holiday in the Stars. Go check it out. There's a little less than 3 weeks left. So yeah, please 19 days. 19 days, I think I saw this morning. So go check that out. In the meantime, we are going to bring in I'm going to say the word legendary creator. Ron Randall is someone whose work I've been a fan of for a really long time. It is and we'll probably get to this, but I'm going to tell this story first before we bring him in because it's fun. So most of my comics I've just recently reacquired in the last 10 years because I collected them as a kid growing up, and stuff happens, and I had to start over. I think I have at least 3 copies of Conqueror of Barren Earth #1 because I have reacquired it. Every time I see it, and I'm like, oh, I love that. Let me get that. And now, until I had a database, I just like, oh, I already had it. Because, and I think one time I just I got all 4 of them because I needed like 3. So I just got an extra copy of them. But I love Conqueror of Barren Earth. I love this style and the artistry that Ron brings to a page. He's somebody who's a wonderful person as well. So before I get too misty-eyed here, I'm going to bring in Ron Randall. Hey, Ron, how are you?
Great. Thanks very much for having me on the show.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for being here.
Sure.
you and I talked of this year, last we talked like next time you're doing a Trekker, we need to get you on, and this is the time. There is a Trekker campaign going on right now.
Yep, there is. About halfway through. In fact, today is the beginning of week 3, so that's about the halfway point for my shows.
That's great. That's perfect. I mentioned earlier that I was a fan of your work when before Trekker came around.
Right.
And I want to talk a little bit about the early days. You're one of the QBs, right?
I am, yeah.
There's that group of you and Tom and Jan and Timothy. Your first work, am I correct in that your first work was on Sergeant Rock?
My I'm fumbling because yes, I started off because I came out of Joe's school,
right,
and was doing some backups in his Sergeant Rock book.
Mm-hmm. Which is why I can't get covers, because Joe did all the covers.
Joe did all the covers, of course, because who else would you have to do a comic book cover? If you get Joe Kubert, just get Joe Kubert. But so I did some backups in Sergeant Rock, but I was also in some of the other DC books at the time, and somebody informed me that I guess my first published story was actually a short backup in I think it was The Unknown Soldier.
Okay.
But essentially my first meaningful work with some of those backups I did in the Sergeant Rock book, working really under Joe's wing. He sort of tutored us along after he graduated from the school. Yeah.
Listen, this show, we spend a lot of time talking about the old days and the characters that existed then. And some of that Sergeant Rock stuff, Bob Koeniger was your writer on that.
Yeah.
How was that? And did Joe protect you?
I've got some stories, but I'm not going to tell those stories. But
okay, well, I will get them at some point.
Well, first of all, the thing about working with on that book was I was working with Joe and Koeniger were two guys who were rock solid comics veterans, and when Koeniger turned in his strip, the bones were there. It was just a really solid structure to the stories. Sometimes there were sort of ludicrous or wild flights of fantasy that went on in some of Bob's stories. Famously, he had a Jeep's tire told one of the stories in the Sergeant Rock book one. Mm-hmm. He was very whatever you want to call it, inventive, creative, whatever, thinking outside the box. Bob could do that stuff, but he knew how to pace a story. He knew what dialogue was supposed to go, how it was supposed to go and stuff. So the stories always, there were never any fatal flaws structurally in any of those stories. That said, Joe was the most hands-on editor you can imagine, because not only was Joe an accomplished, obviously, visual storyteller and draftsman, but he could put together a script pretty well too. So those scripts would sometimes, even if it was only for a 3 or 4 page story, they'd come in with black markers scribbled out and red highlighted stuff like that, as Joe was cutting out entire panels or rewriting the dialogue for captions, because it was he was very territorial about that Sergeant Rock book. He took it very personally. So anything that went through there was going to get Joe's, okay, this is up to a certain standard, and he wanted it done that way. So I don't know if I'd say that he was protecting me from Koeniger in that way, but he was making sure that a pretty solid story would read even better. Later on, sometimes I would take Joe some of the stories that I was working on some of the other books, where there'd be a backup story, and maybe they get some brand new writer to come in and write a script, and they put a brand new artist like me on that little script. And Joe, when Joe didn't like something, he would just do this. He'd go, and then you knew that something wasn't right, And in that case, what Joe was saying, it's so unfair to put a brand new artist to team him up with a brand new writer, because if you've got a brand new writer and there's weaknesses in the story, a good accomplished storyteller can sort of compensate for that to an extent. Mm-hmm. But when you put a couple of newbies together, they just sort of tend to magnify all the mistakes. So So Joe was pretty protective of us in that regard, I'd say, and protective of not of us. He was protective of comics as a storytelling medium, because that was Joe's passion, was tell a good story. You know, that's he. If I got one thing out of the Kubrick School that has infected me the most, it's that passion for telling a good story, and that has had a lot to do with the way my career has gone in lots of ways.
That's good. You just answered one of my questions. Okay.
What's with that?
No, I mean, so there's an interesting concept. Like when you look back at that time, you know, you were doing work with each other. Like when you did you did an issue. You did some work in Scout as well when Tim was doing that. And it's so interesting to look back and see the characters, you being characters actually, and how you kind of overlapped with each other. And then one of the best things, and I'll share this with you, David, at Baltimore this year, I set a dinner and I said, let's, you know, get a whole bunch of the people from First, and I invited Tom Mandrake and Jan Dersema to come to dinner, and they're like, oh, well, we can come, but we need to bring Ron and see if he's going to come. And yeah, you had already had plans, so it didn't work out. But you and I had dinner at the Ringos one year next to each other. I don't remember that.
Yeah, that was a while ago, right?
Yeah, that was a few years ago. Before
Yeah.
In the before times.
In the before times, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But one of the things I wanted to talk about was Conquer Barren Earth, and you did work. And let's put it this way: your style, and I don't know if it's your style, but you tended to do a lot of work in the sword and sorcery fantasy type of realms early on. Especially you did with Conquer Barren Earth, which were originally backups in Warlord. Is that right?
Right. That's right.
And Arak, you did a bunch of work on that, and then Dragonlance, which I got a bunch of. And now what you're working on primarily is space sci-fi. So
Right.
it's very interesting. Like I know that both of those are things that mean a lot to you. Can you talk about why they mean those things to you?
I can try to psychoanalyze myself a bit there.
Yeah, let's try that.
Well, so first of all, as a kid, I grew up reading the comics that I could get here in the Pacific Northwest, which is what was on the newsstand, and I was like Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes and Superman and Batman, and a little bit later, occasionally a Marvel comic would show up on the stands, and so I grew up, in other words, like everybody else coming up at the same time, and that's looking at a lot of superhero comics, right?
Right.
So when I would be creating my own characters and stuff as a little grade school kid, I'd be coming up with superheroes and stuff. And then one day I went to the newsstand and I saw a comic book. You know, they had them stacked in tiers, so you could only see the top. You could only see basically the title, the logo. And someone said Flash. I said, oh, a new Flash comic. That's the guy with the red suit that runs around really fast. He's cool. I picked it up, but then there was another name under it. It was Gordon.
Mm-hmm.
And it was King Comics #5, Flash Gordon. The cover is by Al Williamson. Flash is there crouched. He's got a blue blazer on, and he's tight jeans with a stripe down the side, and he's pointing a blaster right at the reader, right? And I said, what is this? Because I had never seen a piece of art like that or a comic book presented like that in my life. I said, this is not the Flash, the Scarlet Speedster guy. I opened the first page, and I've told this story many times before, but the splash panel of the first page is a down shot looking into this swampy environment with vines in the foreground and scurrying, alien-looking gorilla creatures. And down in this swamp, wading through it are Flash and Dale and Zarkov up to their thighs with their blasters out. And I was just transported to another world, right? And as a little kid, that was it was not like any comic book I'd read before. It was this lush, very believable, very vivid world that was sort of romantic with a capital R, where everything was sort of like larger than life, but without superheroes throwing each other through buildings and that sort of stuff. There was a certain elegance to it because Al Williamson was drawing it.
Of course.
So that was sort of like, I guess, my first foray into science fiction, fantasy, adventure comics. And from there, I went back and found out about Alex Raymond and the Flash Gordon and got into Prince Valiant and all that stuff. So that those seeds were planted pretty early on, and they was like vying with the superhero stuff. And then a couple years later, Conan the Barbarian came out as a comic book and stuff like that. I discovered the Doc Savage paperbacks because I was at a similar story. Yes, I was at a spinner rack in the. That's the one, man. Yeah, well done, well spotted. Yeah, but anyway, so I discovered this stuff, and then but it was still superheroes on the one hand, the sci-fi adventure action stuff on the other. Go to the Kubert School, and I was still doing superhero stuff, but of course, Joe's greatest passion was for Tarzan, right? I mean, those legendary DC Tarzan issues they did, which I read as a kid, was mind-blowing stuff. So and so all that Hal Foster stuff was still there, and the Alex Raymond stuff. So I guess I was just infected by that bug for sort of the classic, elegant illustration, adventure stories that create this rich world that's a little bit understated, you know. So as I got into comics in the early 80s, when it was a superhero market then, but I wound up, as you said, most often the jobs I got were not that, because while I like superheroes and, you know, I guess I can draw them competently, and I did like some Venom stories and stuff like that.
You absolutely can. I mean, there's no.
But I guess the passion or whatever, the affinity to have for that other sensibility that tends to stick around the perimeter, the periphery of the comics industry, or at least it was then. That was always a real strong pull, and I guess I just sort of came out in the work that I did, which is probably why I wound up getting so many of those kind of assignments, I guess.
Well, I mean, I mean, like I said, there's you know, at that time, you know, I was a kid when you were doing that, and you know, your style became the style for, you know, for fantasy and that type of you know, sorcery and swords and stuff like that. I mean, there were three go-tos for that at that time. I mean, obviously there was Grell's Warlords, and that style was slightly different from yours, and then there was Wendy Peeney, and then there was you know, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, that's pretty good company to put somebody in. I'll take it.
That's fair. I think it's fair, because I mean, and David, you're a little younger, but like the Dragonlance books were like, they were TSR, right? So that's all that was the Dungeons and Dragons comic without it being called Dungeons and Dragons, right? And it was just fun, and Eric was great, and it was good stuff. And you eventually kind of moved towards the sci-fi stuff, as we were saying, where you did a bunch of Star Trek, and so you did some stuff on Star Wars for Dark Horse, and you also, you know, you were on Outsiders and Doom Patrol and stuff like that for DC. So some very great stuff. The one last thing I want to talk about in terms of your career that is you know, not Trekker, because we're going to talk Trekker for a while, but Future Quest.
Oh God, yeah.
I literally 3 or 4 days, whatever Friday night was, I was out with Dan Parent, and we were discussing why their DC is losing money by not publishing Hanna-Barbera stuff. Why is there not a Johnny Quest book? You know, right now there should, you know, and I loved that series. What was your experience doing that? How did you?
Well, yeah, you're preaching to convert as far as I'm concerned.
Exactly.
I'm a huge Johnny Quest. I've been, you know, Johnny Quest fan since those cartoons were aired live on Friday night TV.
Right.
So me and Johnny go back a ways, and again, as a kid who was, by then I was already getting fascinated by some of that action adventure sort of stuff anyway. And there's Johnny Quest, who just lives and breathes all that stuff. So
yeah.
From my earliest days, pretty much, that's just where you wanted to be in a way. And I had an earlier opportunity to work on Johnny Quest.
At Kamiko?
At Dark Horse.
Oh, Dark Horse.
I'm sitting there in my home studio minding my own business one day, and I get a phone call, and they said, this is before the emails, before we had the internet.
Yeah.
And they said, hey, we got the rights to do Johnny Quest. Would you like to do Johnny Quest? And I just about fell out of my chair, of course, you know, and I'm thinking those amazing character designs by Doug Wildey and Alex Toth, and all that rich world of adventure. Of course I want to do Johnny Quest. And so they said, well, we'll send you over some stuff. And they sent me their model sheets and stuff. And that's when I found out that this was working on the new Adventures of Johnny Quest, where they updated the kids and made them a little bit older. So they were all redesigned. And they were the designs were extrapolations from those original classic model sheets.
Right.
But they were different enough that it took a little bit of the the childish joy out of my heart. Still, I did those issues. It was great fun. Some of them were written by Barbara Kiesel Randall, a good friend.
Well,
no relation.
she's not only a good friend; she's a huge fan of yours.
Well, mutual.
That's true. I met her a year ago now at LA Comic Con, and your name obviously came up, and it was. She is a huge fan of yours, and I'm not gonna tell you what she told me now, but remind me and I will tell you, because it was
okay.
It was fantastic. We have a couple of off the air things we need to share.
Okay. But anyway, so I got that chance to work on Johnny Quest, and great experience. Love telling all that stuff. Then years later, when Future Quest comes out, and written by Jeff Parker, studio mate of mine, and
yeah, exactly. Parker's the best. Parker
is he kind of had the same knack that Dan Mishkin had in writing the Dragonlance comics you were talking about. A guy who understands the source material, can extrapolate it a little bit so that it can give him enough room to work within that world without slavishly following all the details to the extent that it drains the life out of your own work. It's that balance of, it's got life and vitality, like it's something that's coming just from you, but at the same time it connects in all the best ways with the source material. It's kind of a very conceptual way to try to describe this, but I just read those scripts from Parker, and of course Doc Shanner, who did the redesigns, the updates, and the characters, did his work is just so lovely. So I had great material to work on there, and I thought Parker did an amazing job of weaving together all those different Hanna-Barbera properties, and he told the story that was a Rip Snorton adventure. It wasn't just choked down with too many characters and cluttered up like some things can be. It
so easily could have been, though.
It's sure, yeah, but
it
Jeff knows.
It had so many characters.
Yeah,
all the right, but they hit all the right points. Dave, did you read Future Quest?
I absolutely did. Yes.
What did you think of it?
I loved it. I loved it, and I loved selling it. It was one of the easiest hand selling books. Just because, like, I'm of the age, like, I'm 42, so it's like I am of that cusp, and so it's like hand selling.
You're definitely cusp, because
yes,
I mean, you weren't like those cartoons were still in heavy syndication when I was a kid.
Yes, and they were, thanks to like Toonami and like Nickelodeon.
Oh yeah.
Like I had all that, and then my parents were young, and so eat this.
Of course.
But yeah, no, it was great. Yes.
All right. I want to talk about Checker. Mercy St. Clair. It is absolutely one of the success stories of what Kickstarter can do. And I say that because this is a character that you've been writing for decades now, and she had fits and starts in different places, but it is something that I look forward to. It's one of the things on Kickstarter that I'm like, soon enough there'll be another Kickstarter for another Trucker book, and I know that people look good. They know that they're going to go to Kickstarter, and eventually there will be a new Trucker book. Well, we'll get an email because we already backed it first, but like. Before we get into the new book, I want to share with people we're going to do that thing. We're going to share with people the promo or the video, the trailer video. Thank you for me. I'm getting there. Let's do that. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Ron Randall, and I am thrilled to be back on Kickstarter with this next spiciest chapter yet in Mercy St. Clair's journey of self-discovery and destiny. I've worked on many great books for DC, Dark Horse, Marvel, and others over my career, but now I'm having the time of my life devoting all of my creative efforts to Trekker. With the help of our amazing backers, we've successfully funded all 8 of Mercy's campaigns so far, and each step of the way has been filled with thrills, surprises, and life-changing revelations. Spice, if anything, will be more so. All of Mercy's earlier adventures will be available on this campaign as a complete library reward level and also as individual add-ons. And we'll build in some other cool surprises along the way. So the only thing we need to make this journey complete is you. I hope you'll join us. Thanks for watching.
I can't wait.
Enticing.
Good. That's obviously that's the whole point of those little teaser videos, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you're an expert at them. I mean, obviously that was. I mean, that was some stuff. I'm gonna give a quote to the audience. This is to give you an idea about Trekker and how not only what it is but how it's perceived. Gail Simone said, "It's of stuff like Trekker that revolutions are begun. A female character that is sexy but not sexualized, that is tough but not without flaws and doubts, and that is dangerous and without compassion or remorse."
But not without compassion or remorse.
Not without, right.
Yeah.
And not without compassion or remorse. Somebody copied it wrong. It wasn't me. Exactly. So, how long has Mercy St. Clair been in your head?
About 35 years, give or take, a little bit.
Significantly before we ever saw her.
Well, no, actually, no. The first issue came out in 1987. So,
Really?
what does that math do? 30.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah.
So the Trekker came about when I was approached at a convention here in Portland. I just moved back from the East Coast, and Mike Richardson and Randy Stradley, who were starting up Dark Horse, came to a little local show that I was a guest at.
Oh, okay.
And they were introducing themselves to some professionals that were there, trying to get people to come and work for their little black and white company that nobody heard of before because it was brand new. Anyway, so they offered me a chance to create something for them, and I had never really put my mind towards what I'd do if I had a chance to create a series of my own professionally. I had to answer that question for myself. So by then I'd worked on the Barren Earth, and again my love for all things science fiction was at the forefront of my mind. It had Star Wars hadn't been out that many years. Blade Runner had only been out for a few years. So there was, I'd read Dune years ago. So there was a lot of science fiction, that scanned back for a few decades that were exciting things to me. So I wanted to try to put as much of that into a comic book as I could. If I was going to have this one chance to create my dream comic, I wanted to swing for the fences and do it all. So
Right.
That's what I got started. So it's been around. So I started to think about how could I do this as a comic book, and I also knew I wanted a strong female lead character like we had with the Barren Earth, because that was just such a cool, to me, intriguing idea. Very rare at the time to do that, especially for a character who was going to be the action adventure lead in her own series and who dressed appropriately for her job, which as a bounty hunter, she was going to go out there and come up with very unpleasant and deadly people, and she couldn't dress like a stripper. It just wouldn't work for me.
Sure.
And I'd have to apologize to every intelligent woman in my life if I did a book like that, I felt. So that was kind of a lot of the construction there. So that's kind of where it came from and how it started.
So here's the interesting thing. Like that choice you made, that it was going to be a female lead, and I had to go away from the tropes that are typically associated with female leads in action adventure stuff.
Right.
Why continue down that path, and why didn't you just make it a man and you wouldn't have to worry about that?
I guess the honest answer is, when Mike Richardson leaned across my table at the convention and said, "Ron, if you come and work for us, we will pay you your rate and you can do whatever you want. If you want us to find a writer to work with you, fine. If you want to do something your own, fine." I knew I would never hear that sentence again in my life. And I was right. But so from then, and I thought, and I was drawing the Warlord book at DC at the time. I was drawing a regular monthly comic book for DC Comics. So if I was going to leave that to this little, work at this little star, nobody heard of these guys before. They were doing it was just at the beginning of the black and white thing, And I thought, if I'm going to do this, I better take this damn seriously and answer that question honestly. What would my dream project be? And when I came up with what those criteria were, which I kind of was just laying out there, I was just going to stick by them, because otherwise it frankly wouldn't be worth it. So, and it was a completely non-commercial idea, but Mike Richardson didn't say, "Please pitch us a comic book that you think we could have a good time selling." He just said, "You could do what you want." So, well, okay, I'll call that bluff. This is what I want to do. And I put together my pitch, my proposal, and I sent it to Dark Horse, and they didn't do what they should have done. They should have said, "This is a very nice idea. We don't know how to sell a comic book like this," because they were also pretty young guys at the time and idealistic and just loved comics. And they just said, "That's cool, do it." So then we had to try to figure out how to do it and make it fly, But I said, the selling of it, that's I didn't get into this business to sell comic books. I got in this business to draw comic books, right? And so that's up to them to figure out they're the publishers. Well, joke's on me, because here we are years later, and now I'm the publisher.
You're the Punisher.
Full circle.
Wait.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So, as you were creating this world, you have created a whole cast of characters to go around this bounty hunter, and with her doing her job. And how much fun is that? Like, the creating part? Like, where'd you come up with the name New Geluf? Is it Geluf? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I have no idea where I came up with the name. I was I was just sitting there at my drawing board with a sketchbook, and I was just letting the pencil make shapes on the page, and nudged my way into the drawing of the character, the design, the costume for Trekker. And then I just kind of like spitballed. I just sort of free associated things about building the world. And one thing, I got to say, I'm so glad that it's taken me this long to get around to getting back and finishing up the series, because I'm a much more accomplished storyteller than I was then. And these characters have lived in my head for a lot of years. I mean, there were I went 12 years without doing any work on Trekker at one point, because there wasn't a commercial way to get the stories out there. It had been done, like you said earlier, like a scattershot sort of thing, which is it's a terribly poor service to an ongoing series where all the stories are supposed to connect and gradually trace the evolution of the character, and there's a life arc going on here, and have that interrupted and stuff was that's why I put it on hiatus for a bunch of years. But anyway, in those years, I always knew that my intention was to get back and tell the rest of the series. This is what I want my career statement to be, Trekker, and I've had from the very beginning that very long novel-like journey plan where she starts in one place, goes through all these evolutionary steps, the world gets bigger and more complicated, more characters come on, as you're saying, but it reaches a point of resolution. It's not supposed to be an ongoing forever and ever series, but so having all that time and so when I started by just telling kind of the crime stories, right? She's a bounty hunter. She's out there tracking down this bad guy, getting paid for it. But I knew from the beginning that I couldn't just keep it in that confined world of New Gelaf. The series always was intended to expand and grow, and the cast was supposed to expand and grow. And so I planted some seeds in the earlier stories, hints about things that are happening off planet, things about the bigger powers at play in the world and beyond. with a sense that the reader gets an idea of long before Mercy does that maybe she's supposed to be doing more than just shooting people and getting a paycheck, you know. So that sense of a character with potential, and a series hopefully with potential too, was there from the beginning. But it took me working on it and easing my way into the world to figure out how to do it as well as I can, because by now it's becoming kind of, I don't know if sprawling is the right word, but certainly the scale has expanded, and keeping the different characters sort of on the chessboard and moving forward in ways, and having all these different forces gradually coming to the climax of the series and stuff like that. That takes some intentionality, and I'm glad I've had some time to get to the point where I think I can keep a pretty solid grip on all that stuff as we go forward, taking one intentional step after another now. Does that answer your
No,
question?
it does. Absolutely. I'm having a great time here. Just in case that is not clear. One of the, you scare me here because you're like, there's an end. I'm not ready for that. Okay, we're not ready for that.
Yeah,
I appreciate that you
get
want,
a lot of that.
You want to wrap things up, and at some point there'll be, but there's more to come. This is not the last one, right? We're not.
Oh no.
Okay.
And in fact, I've the webcom to put it is this: when I first envisioned the series back in 1985, 1986, I knew that the character was going to be a series that was going to be exploring, a human being in this violent, sort of dark environment. Now, the comic books at the time were taking a real turn to the grim and gritty. Miller was doing Daredevil and a little bit later Dark Knight and stuff. And, I could see the power of that. There's an allure in that sort of darkness, and adolescent boys really get off in that stuff, right? But I just came to feel there's a certain sort of philosophical dead end to that. If you take your character and you put him in these places that are so dark and grim, it's just like, I came to refer to it as adolescent nihilism. So I wanted a character that sort of started in that dark place. And then see what the exploration is like when we have her go through these journeys, and can she get beyond that, and what's beyond that for her that is still a cool story and that sort of stuff. And I knew that I needed to get to a point of resolution. There's a great novel called The Angle of Repose, which is a geologist term. It's where things reach a certain resting point, rocks rolling down a slope or something like that. And I need this series to get to that point where there's a resolution there. That said, I know now what I will do if by the time I get to that point, if there are still people who want to see more Trekker stories, more stories in this universe and with these characters, I know how I can do things. So don't lose hope, fans.
Well, thank you for.
I like this world as much as you guys
boosting. Can you tell us about who Mercy is and how you have changed, with her adventures? Like, is there something that she teaches you?
I guess probably there is. Who she is she's a character who, see, the short sort of soundbite, and we're all used to, we're supposed to craft these little pitch lines that are pithy. So she's a badass science fiction bounty hunter, but that's not who she is. That's where the stories start. Who she is a human being who, like I said, she's immersed in this dark and gritty world, and it's all that she knows. But that's where the stories start, not where they end. So the series is not about her being a bounty hunter. It's about her growth, her evolution as a character, like all of us, trying to find her place in the world. And she finds out that she's more complicated than she originally thought she was. The world is more complicated than she thought it was. The world has a way of breaking us all open. We come out with these preconceived notions of how tough we are or how smart we are, or whatever. Most of us get humbled and educated a little bit on the way. Sometimes it's painful, sometimes it's fatal. So that's who she is to me. She's a character. Like Gail said it so well. You know, she's got her flaws and she's got her weaknesses, but she's got a lot of passion that drives her in a lot of ways, and people respond to that well. One thing I try to shy away from as much as I can in the stories is having a specific moral that I overtly try to put across to people or consciously. I sort of
You're not
feel
trying to
that
bang people over the head.
Yeah. I feel like, you know, whatever my worldview, my values are, for lack of a better phrase, those are going to come out in the story and the way the characters interact one way or another. And it's best if I just sort of stay out of the way of that and let it sort of unfold naturally. But yeah, I mean, for sure, the fact that I'm a few decades on in my own life and have had a lot of experiences, successes, failures, friendships that have helped to shape who I am, helped to modify my views of the world and stuff. All that stuff helps to inform the series too. And, you know, to an extent, Mercy St. Clair is going through a lot of that same stuff on her journey. She meets somebody, they change her life in a certain way, sometimes in a profound way. And they may leave her life, but those changes remain, you know, that sort of stuff. So, because for me, you know, one thing I know about myself, you know, as you get older, you sort of learn to embrace your strengths and accept your weaknesses, sort of. I think I'm pretty good at crafting and conveying some characters in the stories that hopefully have a certain resonance with readers. I'm not the most gifted writer at coming up with brand new, thrilling, high concept stuff and innovative storytelling and stuff. I'm not. I love what Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples do with Saga. I think there's just dazzling sci-fi stuff going on there all the time, and also still a real human, for lack of a better, based heart to the series. So it compels me and brings me on. But every story is like, whoa! I would never have thought of doing a scene like that, or what a concept to put in a science fiction series. It's just, that's great stuff. It's not what Trekker is. Trekker is a little bit more, you know, sort of boots on the ground sci-fi that way. But what keeps the stories arresting for me, and I think for most of the readers, is the character of Mercy and some of the other cast that are really helping to shape her lives. And to me, that's what any good story's got to have, that at the center. You know, characters that live and breathe and that you care about. You don't always think they're doing the right thing, maybe, but you when they screw up, you want them to learn from it and get better, you know?
Sure, absolutely. What is Spice about? What is this series going to take it? What is the adventure of the hero?
So the Spice is about Mercy has, over the course of several adventures, come to an excruciatingly slow conclusion for her that probably the readers got to a long time earlier, hopefully, that she has got to take a stand and oppose the this oppressive galactic ruling council system. She didn't want to be political. She just wanted to, you know, keep those blinders on. But again, the world has a way of calling us to where it wants us to be, I think. And to do that, she can no longer be this lone wolf bounty hunter that she started out as. She has gradually sort of acquired people in her life as these adventures have gone on. And now she needs to be more intentional about that. She needs to find a group of people that she can work with to coalesce around, to mount some sort of meaningful, you know, opposition, be part of the larger conversation that's going on in the stars about what's the course of things going to be here, you know. And it's not easy for Mercy to find a group to belong to. She is not a natural joiner. Spice is a character that's a member of one of the rebel factions. She's a leader of this rebel faction that Mercy suspects maybe they can get along because they're also tough and they don't mind getting their hands dirty. And Mercy in the past has tried pairing up with another organization that was very idealistic and high-minded, and it just wasn't a good fit for her. So anyway, the story Spice is about Mercy's attempt to connect with that organization through Spice, the leader of it, and how, as with most things, there's a lot of complications that ensue. As they say, as like the video says, sparks fly and blood will flow.
Yeah. That sounds fantastic. I mean, there's this concept that that I like. This is one of the things that I've enjoyed about Trekker over the years is that there is a growth. There's these, you know, it has evolved almost with me, you know, or as in a natural manner. Like you start out just idealistic and you don't care about the machines that move the world. You're just enjoying the world you're living in. And as you get older and more aware of those machines, you feel like you inevitably have to take a position on what you think about them, whether you want to or not, you know. And so like that kind of thing that you're talking about where Mercy is in that space now, is very real. It's very something that's relatable, you know.
Yeah.
So this, like I said, we're halfway through on this, and the link is in the bottom of for Spice. Am I correct in that you have addressed Mercy's sexuality at one point through this lifestyle, or through her career, or her existence? Like how did you approach that particular thing?
Well,
and why did you feel you needed to?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, like it's something that so there are. It's very interesting. Like I said, in the growth of the story. Originally, it was one of the first things Dark Horse did back in the day, black and white. It was just, you know, let's go on these crime stories, and you know, a lot of the things that you have come to by staying with this character for so long are things that would have evolved if we were still getting Grimjack stories, right? Like Grimjack would have evolved in different ways as well, you know.
Hopefully, yeah.
Dark, I mean, yes, but even though it was darker and it was, you know, set in a different kind of place, but like eventually, if you keep doing things long enough, then you have to change, you have to evolve, change.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you approached that storyline, how and why did you do it?
Well, I approached it carefully, I guess would be the way I'd put it. When at the very beginning of the series, I gave Mercy this friend and a confidant that had nothing to do with her world. Molly is working in a music store selling instruments, and but Mercy would get together with Molly for a cup of coffee and just sort of unburden herself about what was going on in her love life, or the frustration she was having with a case that she was on, or conflicts with her uncle who was a cop, lieutenant of the police force that didn't get along with bounty hunters, that sort of stuff. So there was just, so she was just a character to give us some insights into Mercy that Mercy wouldn't freely share with anybody else, pretty much. And after a while, I realized, well, no matter how crappy things are going in Mercy's world, she always makes time out to get together with Molly. And I realized at some point, I think they're in love. And when I realized that, I thought, well, what do you do with that? So, but the more I thought about it, the more I just thought it just seemed like this is the way, it just felt like that's the way the story needed to go. That's where the character needed to go. I think, and I just felt, I just sensed, how can I put it? Just sensed Pater as a storyteller. I says, that is something that is going to add so much dimension to this series and bust open entire landscapes of emotion and personality and meaning for Mercy as a character. And I thought that's cool. It was also scary because
Sure.
How to go about doing this in a way that felt organic to the series, maybe a big good way to put it, where I wasn't feeling, I I didn't want to feel like I was trying to be exploitative or sensationalistic, or any of those things. I didn't want it to be one of those cases like on an old Marvel comic when they slap on the cover, this issue, everything changes, that kind of stuff.
Right.
I want it to be like real life is, where we have these incremental, gradual changes that build up, and then we might have an aha moment, but everything doesn't change all at once. That's not the way the world works. So I tried to go about it, building it so that growing awareness might become apparent to the readers before it became apparent to Mercy. That was kind of what I was after. And when it finally gets to the moment where Mercy accepts it and realizes it and goes up and grabs Molly and gives her a big kiss, I said, well, we'll just see what happens. And honestly, the response I got from readers was, finally. So I guess I'd say I felt pretty good about that. I guess I felt that I'd done the job that I wanted to do pretty well, because obviously that's exactly the reaction that I was hoping for.
Sure.
And ever since that moment, I myself anyway have felt the energy in the series, the stakes the stakes that they're playing for, or whatever, are a lot higher, and everything just feels much more real to me.
Is there liberation that you feel? Like, I can see there's an energy. I can see an energy in you about this story that I don't see in a lot of other creators when they're doing creators own stuff. There's something even more special about your excitement over telling this story and having the story unfold to you and to your readers.
Yeah, well, I guess it's basically because a lot of it goes back to, like I say, I think I answered the question right when back in 1985, what would my dream project be?
Yeah,
because that's what it is, and being able, for a lot of reasons, I've been able to follow my own nose, my own instincts on where to go with the stories and where to take the series. I can listen to what I would like to do, what feels like it's the right direction, that's going to expand the series and give it some more energy and just change gears in an exhilarating way that still lets the story and the series maintain its integrity. Because that's very important to me, that I've been able to keep a story that feels to me like it's true to the series. I mean, I make my missteps and stuff like that here and there, but I don't think I've done anything to betray the initial contract that I signed with the readers when I did the first Tracker story. These are sort of the ground rules we're playing with. They're not going to change. The character's not going to change from the core of who she is. Anything that happens in the series should feel like, yes, this checks. This is part of that same world. So liberating. You asked, is it liberating?
Well, let me rephrase it, because I was thinking about it, and there is there's a concept of being authentic to yourself, right? Mm-hmm. and not living within the expectations of other people putting upon you, and that moment of identity for Mercy, and moving forward, and her accepting her authenticity and moving forward and doing something about it. It seems like that is what I'm trying to say by liberating. Like, she's not trapped anymore, even though she may not have known she was trapped. You know what I'm saying? Yeah,
and there's some truth to that. At the same time, I knew that when I was writing the first story, when they were together as a couple, I had written a moment in it when, I can't remember exactly how it went down, but when there was something made about, some people wanting to get pushback on it or something like that. And my editor at the time was Shauna Gore. He's a great editor, great person too. And she just said, by now, Ron, it's a few hundred years in the future. It's probably not going to be that big a deal for the other people around there. So I softened that moment quite a bit. So it's not a series where Mercy suddenly says, "Oh my gosh, I'm in love with Molly. This means right. I'm this and that," and all that sort of. I mean, the sort of struggles with identity that a lot of people are having to have now because of the world we're living in now. I hope anyway that stuff won't be as overt in Mercy's world. At the same time, if the relationship that Mercy and Molly celebrate together can be at all sort of affirming to people that are going on that journey now, that I'm happy that's there. But I don't want their relationship in any way to seem like they're spokespersons for that. I'm not qualified to do any of that sort of stuff. I'm just trying to do. I remember years ago, before I came up with Trekker, it might have been Chris Claremont. I don't remember, but there was some at a comic at a convention. Some writer who wrote some pretty successful female characters back then was asked, as a guy, how do you write a female character? It's believable or whatever. And he says, I just try to write a human being. And
I think Chris said that.
I think I've heard Greg Rucka say that too.
Yeah, it could be, but I imagine Chris would have said it first.
Yeah.
But it's really, it's sometimes it may feel like a bit of an oversimplification, but basically it's a pretty good principle to follow. I figure with Mercy, okay, she's exasperated here. What's a likely human response to that moment? Will she choke down her anger? Will she say the wrong thing? Will she break something? Because I think we're a lot more alike than we're different in our basic, human responses and motivations and stuff like that. So I've just kind of gone on that theory from the beginning. Because again, even when I was first creating Trekker, I knew it was before the whole idea about Mercy, falling in love with Molly or that becoming apparent. Just I knew I was a straight white guy writing a female character back when there wasn't a lot being done. I wanted to try to write one who felt believable and real, and I said I could be getting in real trouble with if there's a perceptive female reader who just thinks I'm doing a crappy job, and I go to a convention and she calls me out on it. I would have no defense. So,
sure.
So fortunately, that hasn't. Maybe they think that, but it hasn't happened to me so far. I've gotten pretty good comments. So.
Absolutely. I want everybody to know that we have the Kickstarter address scrolling on the bottom of the screen. It's also in the comments. So make sure you go back and like Ron said in the video, there's plenty of opportunities to catch up on Trekker if you haven't been there. I want to take a little break from that, and I want to kind of go back to talk about your experiences in the industry. And it's kind of a little play game, but you before Trekker, you ink yourself now most of the time, right? Is that correct?
Now all the time.
Now all the time. But when you first starting out, you were a penciler, and you had people ink you.
Yeah, well,
and sometimes you were saying,
yeah. I mean, when I went to the Cuban school, we were taught to do the whole job, the whole enchilada there. But there were a few periods in my career when I was getting work just as a penciler. And there were a few years in my career when I was getting work just as an inker. So I've kind of worn both of those hats in different ways at different times.
I want to know who is the person who you think inks you the best.
Oh boy.
I'm not asking for. This is not a negative question. Who do you think inked you the best? And I'll give you a second because I want to tell a little story that I had the other night. I was at the dinner, or I was talking to Dan Jurgens, and we were talking about his experiences. We were talking about he had said that in his experience in working with George Perez, that George has inked him, and he has I think he's inked George, but he is. And George has written for him to draw, but it was never a reverse situation where Dan had written something for George to draw. And, George and his famous million panels, how do you take that script and adapt it to something George would have done?
Yeah.
And one thing I said, and Dan agreed with me, was I said that I think that George inked Dan better than George inked George. And he agreed. And I think that's fair. I think the way that he approached that was even more precise and sharp than he did on his own pencils.
Yeah.
So That's just a fun story to share with people. But who is? I gave you time now. Who's the person?
I don't have a single answer. I'm sorry. I can give you a few. I can give you a couple.
Give me a couple. Let's go.
Well, first of all, I will say as a penciler inker myself, I tend to like it when an artist inks their own pencils. I like John Buscema when he inks himself better than anybody else that inks him. He's been inked by amazing inkers, of course, you know. But when John inks himself, I see more Hal Foster there. The quality of the line works, the brushwork that he does, and his passion for that sort of stuff, it comes across well. And I like it. You know, it's not as
what is your opinion?
It's not as vavoomy, but I mean, it just feels really good there. So, so I like. Go ahead.
But what's your opinion of Alcala inking Buscema?
Did you ever see the?
It's a great debate. It's one of those things you can ask that question to any.
Did you ever see the movie Amadeus?
Yes.
Yeah, when Salieri says to Mozart, "Too many notes." I think Alcala does. You know, he does great work. He really does. I like John's work when it's a little bit more open than that. I'm just that way, you know. Anyway, to stop trying to dodge your question for me, when I started doing the Dragonlance book, I was inking myself, and I was just trying to be as Wally-Wood as I could possibly on those first few issues.
Excellent.
Then later on, I was penciling it, and I couldn't keep inking it, deadlines being what they were. So Barbara, the editor, tapped a guy named Randy Elliott to ink me on that. And Randy also later inked me on the Justice League work that I did. And I really loved his work. He kept a lot of what I was trying to do in the pencils very, very well. And as a penciler, you always appreciate that. Sure. But and another, if I get time for a little bit more of a short list, there was also Rick Magyar that inked me on a science. Well, he inked me on Arak, and later on a thing I did at.
Rick is very underrated.
Epic for Marvel when we did a mini series called Idol. And then the other guy that I have to put on the list is Carl Kiesel, who I haven't been able to work with Carl very much. But Carl's inks are they're just the best. They're just so they're so crisp and clean and so full of craft. And
yes, but Carl's so this was the conversation we had. Dan and I were talking how inks can be additive, and I think Carl came up probably. But the thing about Carl's inks is that it is almost additive. Like there's something that he really pulls out of the pencils. He pulls out the best of the pencils in certain ways without putting his own stamp on it. You know, I think that's the key to it.
Yeah, I remember Dick Giordano was a great multifaceted inker, and
one of the absolute best of all time.
Yeah, and he was one of the teachers at the Kubert School, and he was also the I don't know what the title is, executive editor or managing editor. He was the guy running the show.
He was editor-in-chief, I think.
Editor-in-chief at DC Comics when I was getting started, which is one reason series like The Baron Earth and Arion,
Arion. Exactly.
And Johnny Thunder got miniseries back then because Dick really liked to do things that weren't superheroes. But one time he said, because he would work in Manhattan, work at the DC offices, then he'd ride the train back to Connecticut to his home in the evenings, and then he'd work in the evenings inking. And he said whatever pages he had, pencil pages that he had that he was taking home to ink, when he was riding the train on the way home, he'd be looking at the pencils and trying to figure out what is the penciler after here? What am I going to do on these pages to make them work? So he put a lot of thought into that. What is the penciler's intentions and what's going to serve the story well? He didn't think, what can I do to impose Dick Giordano on this work? And I think Carl does the same, and a lot of the great inkers do the same. Honestly, I think one thing that happened with sometimes an editor, back then when you were doing so much work, they would say, we want this book to have a certain look to it. We know there's certain inkers who just sort of pour their own style over the top of whatever the pencils are. we'll get a result that we know that's good, and we'll just do that. It's less risky.
So
I
you
think
get a consistent look.
it
Is what
has,
you're
yes,
saying.
it has less, I think, less individuality, less personality to it in a way, but it's a solid book that can be put out, and they know they got a sure thing there. So I think sometimes that can, or at least has happened in the past, back when inkers were a bigger factor than they are these days, frankly.
Right. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
I say that in the fact that there are still plenty of people who are out there who are inking.
Oh yeah.
And it was, as I said, a good inker is almost additive. Like they do that thing where they pull out the best of what the pencils are intended. There were a lot of bad inkers. We both know Mike Grell, so we know who his least favorite is. And
well, yeah, I mean, it's that's true of art in general, isn't it? There's some geniuses. There's some really good craftspersons who work at a very high level all or almost all the time, and then there's people who are just doing what they can and just getting by. It's all over. It's all across the board.
and there's an interesting transition that's happening in the way, because so many because of the digital space. I think the depth and texture that were in panels that were put there by pencils and inks are being replaced with colors. Do you find that?
I do. Yeah. In fact, I had an amazing aha moment several years ago. I went into the studio that I'm a member of, and lying on the table was a comic book. The first half of it was drawn by one artist. The second half of the same story was drawn by a different artist. The first half was drawn by an artist who and they both pencil inked their own stories.
Mm-hmm.
And the first half was drawn by an artist who intentionally drew it in a fairly open style, a lot of line work, very little, if any, rendering of textures through patterns and cross-hatching and that sort of stuff. And the second half was drawn by a very established and accomplished pro who did a lot of double lighting and effects and the sort of stuff to separate planes through black in the foreground, black in the background, white in the background, all those sort of traditional classic ways to solve these problems. And then the whole book was inked by a all inked digitally, of course, with all the screens and the gradients and the wide variety of color tones and lens flares and all that sort of stuff. The first half of the book looked hip and cool and modern, and the second half was just choked to death. And it had nothing to do with how good the artists were. It had to do with not pairing the right sort of coloring approach over the sort of pencils you're offered. If you get work that's really highly rendered in black and white, Joe Kubert said, you should try to, make your black and white work. Just assume that the pencil is going to pour color, purple over the whole thing. So you've got to separate the planes. You've got to establish light sources. You've got to have it all there in the black and white, because there's some, back then it was coloring courses much more primitive then. And as far as the techniques and stuff like that, you had a few arranged things you could do. And some people didn't know how to color very well, but they could fill in the spaces and make the deadlines, right? So
right.
Joe used to basically do preemptive damage control. So the work is always going to have a certain level to it, We're not in that world anymore. And when, like we were talking earlier, and I made that sort of offhand comment about how something about inkers aren't as important as they used to be. That was careless speaking. Inkers are still vitally important, but the end result of the work that we see from the page now is so much more affected by the coloring because of all the digital techniques than usually an inker can bring to it. The pencil and ink art can just be drowned with heavy coloring, and on that nice bright white paper where the color just pops so much. So and this, frankly, that technique is neither good nor bad as far as I'm concerned. It can do great things, but there was a painful learning curve where the industry and the colorist had to learn what to do with this new powerful set of tools they had. And at first, everybody was just out of control, and it was just nuts. And now the good colorists with some sensitivity and touch are dialing things back and finding out how to do that strategically. And they're being artists with their color, and they're working, like Dave, like you were saying, it's a collaborative medium, and you've got to understand who you're playing with and give them space to do their thing. You know, you can't be a rock and roll band and everybody's banging out with the amp on 10 all the time. You got to back off and let the pedal steel guy have his moment. You know, and you've got to make room for your collaborators. And you know, the pencilers have to allow room for the color, the inkers to come in and do their stuff. And this day and age, the inker has to allow room for the colorist to contribute something too. I think, you know, most of the time it's got to be that way.
Dave, so you hire people to do, you know, art, do the physical art. So when you're approaching, you know, colorists that are coming onto your book, or how what type of things do you think about when you want someone to do the work? Do you how much do you edit? What style you want them to approach things with?
Well, you know, thankfully I've worked with Tony a lot. So it's like he and I have a particular shorthand and a style and an understanding of like what the mood and where we're going with the book. And then, you know, his particular line work, whether he's trying to experiment with a new, like more ink washes, or if he just wants to do like, you know, heavier, thick line work, you know, then we talk about like, well, what kind of colors do we want to work with? What kind of colorists? And generally, since Simon has worked with Tony, it's like, cool, like they pair well together. And then with Guilherme, like he worked close with Simon. So him working close with Simon, like allows him to work with Tony better as well. So it's like, so he's coloring most of the book now, and it looks fantastic. It looks seamless. But yeah, I think it depends really on the collaboration of like the inker penciler or whomever's doing the line work, and how comfortable they feel with the colorist, like, and the style of the book and what we're trying to accomplish. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah.
I mean, so Ron, and as you bring in, you know, colorists for Trekker, you know, what was that process like for you?
Well, it's excruciating because the colorist I have on Trekker is me. So, and I find myself very difficult to work with. When I was first getting back to doing Trekker after that 12-year hiatus that we talked about, I knew I was going to need to find somebody who could color with a feel for the world that I had already established and wanted to, you know, continue to move forward with. And one of the former studio mentees that we'd had, a young man who was just coming up and learning the ropes, and had left, you know, had finished his time with us and went on to start his own career as a colorist, it turns out. And I bumped into him at a convention, and I looked at his portfolio and said, "This is the guy." And it was Jeremy Caldwell, because he has a very he's got a wide range of techniques he can use. He went to school and got formal training as a painter, you know, in the physical world, but was taking that and bringing it to comics. Anyway, so first I tagged Jeremy to be my colorist, and when we were doing it through Dark Horse, they would pay for the colorist, and so we got Jeremy to do the first news story I did, and also added color to a couple of the earlier stories when we put out a Dark Horse Trekker omnibus a number of years ago.
Right.
So but like since the 2013 era, 2014 era.
Yeah, right in there. Yeah, somewhere 10, 12, 13, whatever. Yeah. But then when I took Trekker on myself to self-publish it and stuff, I didn't have the budget to pay Jeremy to color the whole book, so I paid him to do my covers for me and some pinups and that sort of stuff. But just to keep the expenses down, to make it manageable, I said I'm going to have to take a crash course in coloring. So
did you take a class? Did you take a course?
Just from peers. I got pointers from this person and that person. And figured out some basic about digital coloring. And I said, look, I'm never going to be one of these colorists who has all the techniques and all the bells and whistles. That's not what I'm after, because I wouldn't have the time to the craft level of craft to do that. I didn't have time to even learn all those skills. But also the coloring that I like the most for work like I do is coloring that is sort of old school in that it lays behind the line art. I don't want the coloring to be on top of things like I feel it sometimes is in some of the books that I see. That's just not my aesthetic for comics. It's not my aesthetic for Trekker. It's much more about the line work, and I feel the coloring is.
I think it's pretty good. I just want to say, it's pretty damn good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
I mean, this looks really fantastic, and it's the thing about it, and this is one of the things that I've always loved about Trekker, and that it feels in certain ways like it's a Ron Randall book. Like it has the same like aesthetic as Barren Earth or Dragonlance, and that's like this book could have come from that time. It's got that nostalgic like scent to it, and
it smells terrific.
Listen, let me tell you, I said I have 4 copies of Barren Earth, and
I love good smelling books, man.
They smell.
Yeah.
Hey, you're preaching to the choir. Yeah. That's the first thing I do is like, oh.
Yeah, my wife hates them. She's,
Nah.
I walked into my local comic shop like a couple weeks ago, and they had a box on the counter of like just old stuff that wasn't even bagged. And like I walked like 2 feet into the store.
Oh yeah.
And the counter's at the back, and I smelled it. I'm like, whew, okay, let's go and see what's in there.
Yeah.
There was I got a book that's I'm collecting the first volume of Teen Titans, and there was one in there, and I bought that for $2, and I'm like, yep, that fits right into there. So go ahead. I'm sorry, I went off.
That's okay. But yeah, I mean, well, thank you. First of all, I try to keep. I said I'm going to have like maybe I'll have 2 or 3 coloring tricks, techniques, things that I like. Way to use a little texture here, a little lighting there, but I try not to be too fancy about it. I feel that 90% of successful coloring is simply color selection. Choose the right colors, and then you don't need to have a lot of the fancy effects to make the page really work. And I've come to feel I look at good coloring as sort of like the soundtrack to the movie, in that it can sort of inform the tone or the emotional atmosphere that you're after in a scene. And the thing about a good soundtrack, you don't freaking notice a soundtrack when you're watching a movie.
Right.
You don't say, "Oh, that's a great little those string arpeggios are awesome," and then the chill is running up and down my spine because of that great scoring of the orchestral score. No, you think this is a scary moment in this movie I'm experiencing.
Right.
And
that's
again,
a great
that's
way
the
to
way
put it. Perfect.
The way they have the color, just like all the techniques of storytelling that I try to do, close-ups and down shots and flipping angles and all that sort of stuff. Those sort of things, another cartoonist that looks at the work might want to analyze it and break it down that way. I don't want a reader to know any about that stuff. I'm not here to show off technique. I'm here to tell a good story. And that's what Joe Kubert always taught. The kid gets there, they see that first panel, that first splash panel, you grab them by their collar and you drag them into your story, and you don't let them go until the last page. And the way to let them go is you do something that's confusing in the story. They can't follow the story. That'll take them out of the story. You do something that sticks out by being too cool. That'll pull you out of this. Oh, look at this great panel that so-and-so do here. Or this splash page, and they're showing off all their technique. That's not telling the story. That's showing off. And I mean, I've got an ego like everybody else. I want people to be impressed with a clever turn of phrase or a really well-drawn blah, blah, blah. But it's, you've got to pick your battles there, and you just got to be, you've got to be willing to supplement those impulses as much as you can to just what's serving the story really well here. And, when you've got that endless array of colors and techniques you can use in digital coloring, it's really easy to just throw it all there,
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. That's great stuff. What about your career? Like, so you've done so much. Like, it's your bibliography is large. Is there a character that you didn't create that you either didn't get to work on or would have liked to work on more up to this point?
I would like to have worked. I never got to work on Flash Gordon. That would have been a
Well,
hoot.
so he was the topic of discussion with Dan Jurgens the other night.
Yeah, Dan did some Flash Gordon, didn't he? Yeah.
He did. It was not always pleasant.
Yeah.
But there's going to be new Flash Gordon, so you should talk to the Mad Cave folks. So you can get a cover out of them or something.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the guy that's doing Flash Gordon now is Dan Scotti, who was also a member of the studio that I'm still a member of. And Dan's style is so wildly different.
The
newspaper strip. Yeah.
But Mad Cave is going to be doing comics.
The Flash Gordon comic. Yeah.
Yeah. Jeremy Adams is writing them.
Okay.
I'm just saying.
Maybe I'll drop him a line. But Dan's doing a great job on the newspaper strip. It's
absolutely.
It's completely different than Alex Raymond in every way except for this huge passion for telling a great adventure story. And Dan's got that in spades. He came up working, did some stuff on The Spirit, and then he had a webtoons comic called Lavender Jack, which is just so great and pulpy. And anyway, but that's enough of that. But so I would love to work on Flash Gordon, I guess. I mean, there's characters. Wonder Woman is great. I'd never been a big fan of Wonder Woman until I drew her very, very minimally in a few issues of Justice League. But I just fell in love with getting to do that. And then I helped out with Gail.
That's awesome.
I got to help out with Gail Simone and Terry Dodson on an arc of their great Wonder Woman run. And I just, I mean, there's a reason these characters are iconic, and so things like that. I really loved when I got to draw Supergirl for a miniseries or for an arc of stories there at DC. Supergirl is really fun to work on. There's a bunch of characters that are fun.
How was that working on Supergirl at that time?
That was of all the characters that I didn't create, the most comfortable entrance. I got the script and I said, I know what I think Supergirl should look and feel like to me, and this script allows me to do that. And it was just, it was kind of effortless. Oh shoot, who was? You're catching me. I'm having a senior moment here. I can't.
That's
blanking
fine.
on that.
I don't.
But I just remember thinking, I had a very mostly when I would get a job to do something, a new character that I hadn't tackled before, there's a certain amount of that wrestling around with her, or you're not wrestling, but you're seeking to find your way into the character, the feel for that, who that character feels like, because that'll inform everything that you draw. That'll help you when you're pushing the pencil around on the page. And with Supergirl, it just like I just clearly knew what I was after there, and so yeah, it was pretty cool. It was pretty fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
Kelly Puckett and Will
Thank
Pfeiffer.
you. Yeah. Pfeiffer. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good job. Good research.
Yeah.
Excellent. You're admirable sidekick. Thank you very much. All right, hang on. We have a question from Robert Deans. How often do you remind Parker that you love Flash Gordon so you could have drawn covers?
Well, yeah, that's a tricky thing. We were in the studio together at the same time when he was doing those things, but I was like working on my thing, and they had their thing rolling on there, and I think Parker's aware that I like Flash Gordon pretty much, but that's he wasn't calling all the shots on that book himself. He might have put in a good word or something, but no, that's okay. When Dan Scotti got the job of taking over or revising the strip, I mean, I would have been consumed with envy, except for one thing. I'm already doing my own version of Flash Gordon, and I like it 100 times better. For me, I mean,
see that right there. Show over. Like, I mean, that's the perfect thing.
It's really true. I mean, all these other, like I said, I had fun time drawing that. I got to draw a little bit of Spider-Man when I did a solo miniseries, and those characters are fun because I grew up with those things and stuff. But honestly, I don't mean to sound too simplistic or simple-minded here, but I'm pretty damn happy doing Trekker. I'm
happy you're doing Trekker.
Pretty much anything I want to do with a character or in a story. I can find a way to put it into Trekker, and I'm okay with that. I really, really am. I don't think when I was a kid I really thought, oh, Hal Foster, he did Prince Valiant for his whole career. I want to do that. But that's kind of what I've grown to aspire to do, or I guess I'm doing now. This is everything I want to do in comics. I can find pretty much a way to put that into an issue of Trekker one or another. Especially now that the series has the center of gravity of the series has changed from being that city of New Gelaf on Earth. It's now sort of out in the stars. And every story that I tell, every one of these graphic novels that I kickstart, it's almost like a different subgenre of science fiction. There was the first one was called Chapeltown. That was like a sci-fi western. Then the next one, she gets together with a space pirate, and they go out in the galaxy, and he gets put in prison and has to break out of prison and stuff like that. So it's space pirate swashbucklery stuff. The third one, she winds up landing on a planet solo in the middle of a no man's land between two forces, battling for that planet. So it's a war story. It's a Sergeant Rock story. Then there's a story where she's on this jungle moon. It's called Hunter's Moon, and there's a genetically modified sort of super soldier experiment gone wrong. So it's Mercy versus the monster. It's a Tarzan versus the jungle force creature.
Of course. So
or
it's all
somebody
Joe.
put out
It's all Joe.
Yeah. Or somebody put out to me, it's sort of like a Predator thing too.
Sure.
So every one of the books, I can shift my gears a little bit, and it keeps it fresh for me, and hopefully for the readers too. It doesn't become overly familiar. And yet again, since each of these stories takes Mercy one step farther on this path, hopefully there's a through line that holds them all together. So it has that right balance of there's continuity and again integrity of the series, but enough variety that there's breath of fresh air feeling every once in a while too.
I see your Cintiq behind you. Do you draw on paper still, or do you do digitally?
Yeah, the final work on Trekker is all done digitally now. It's just I can get the work produced. More efficiently.
Do you sketch it or draw it on paper and then scan it in and ink it digitally?
I draw all the thumbnails.
Size.
All the thumbnails are drawn this size, so each one of these squares is a page.
Okay.
And I got this from working with Joe many years ago. You start with really little spontaneous scribbles that you're not invested in, because the first time your first idea for a panel sequence may suck, but you just get it down there on paper, and if it's only taking you 15 seconds to do it, you can easily do another version of it. So it's like any artist. You start with the big picture and you gradually sort of refine it down to the details. You don't start with the details and build out. That's just a terrible way to do work. So anyway, I still put a pencil in my hand and do the layouts, and then I will take a little marker and ink those layouts to make the scribbles a little bit more decipherable when I go back to it. But then I scan it into the computer, blow them up, and do the work because of the software now.
So you scan it in, blow it up, drop it down, and then drop it down a layer, and then just draw it on top of it.
Then draw it on top on the computer with the software programs that let me replicate first the pencil lines, because I'm a penciler, so I use a stylus and I do the pencil art. It's spontaneous. It can be a little bit sloppy, and do layers. It's so much easier to make corrections and stuff like that digitally. And then I will go through the process of inking it digitally too, and because I still have that mentality. I mean, I did this for decades. I was do the thumbnails, then you do the pencils, and you wrestle through that, and then you go to the inks.
That there's anybody who doesn't, even the people who produce the ink lines themselves, don't go through the process of penciling and then inking over those pencils.
Yeah, I think you just got to do that unless you're some kind of a crazy, alien creature that can just draw flawlessly line after line.
Yeah,
well, it's for me. It's still every time I do a page, it's a wrestling match. I'm trying to get the figures to work out right and the panels to flow and all that sort of stuff, which keeps it a great challenge for me. I can never just sort of walk my way through a page. It would just be a disaster.
Well, speaking of crazy aliens, do you script out pages ahead of time? How do you script out the whole thing? Do you write a script?
Yes.
Because there is a crazy alien out there who's drawn and produced 270 something issues of a book, and doesn't. He just sits down each day and draws with the page for that day.
Yeah, and that's more power. That's Eric you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, and more power. I mean, it's, you know, one thing I've come to believe about art is that there are no rules in art. There are no ironclad, inviolable rules. You can break any rule there is in
Yeah.
art,
Oh, sure.
but there are some damn good suggestions.
Mhm.
And if you break them, I think it's important to know what rule, quote unquote, you're violating, why you're violating it, have a good reason for doing that, and compensate for that. So if you want to stack panels on the left of a page so the reader doesn't know which tier they're going to next, if you know this, we're getting into the nitty gritty of
No,
the
first,
shop type.
this
But
is the process section of the show. We get
Yeah,
we
yeah,
get as
okay.
deep as we can.
But you say, okay, I know that if I lay the panels out this way, the reader's eye might have trouble figuring out which panel to go to next. You cannot let your reader have that problem. You cannot. That's an F in storytelling. So you
I
say, okay,
believe me, I
Yeah.
understand.
so then what can I do to compensate for this and make sure the reader, even though the panel layout by itself is confusing, the way I position the word balloons and text will guide their eye the right way, or I have the characters angling it certain ways so that the eye cannot be confused about where to go next. Things like that can happen. So, so my rule for myself, because it works for me, is I write every story out. I start with the story outline. I send it into my editor. Even though I'm self-publishing Trekker, I pay somebody to be my editor.
Yep.
If Ernest Hemingway needed an editor,
Yeah,
Ron
listen.
Randall needs an editor.
All of you self publishers out there, you cannot make a story without somebody beside yourself seeing it.
Yeah, I say it's like, I mean, it's like, and your editor can't be your best buddy who's just going to say how much they like what you do.
Mhm.
No, well, they can be your best buddy, but they have to be able to tell you.
But they have to be your best buddy who is able to say, that doesn't work, Ron. And I say it's like having it's like if you're a gymnast and you've got a coach. You're up there on the uneven parallel bars, you're doing your routine and stuff, and you're doing all these things. And you may not notice that if your hands were 3 inches closer together on that bar, you'd get more velocity or something. But the coach down on the ground seeing it, he can see that and say that to you. And that's what an editor does. You're blind to your own. I'm blind to my own weaknesses sometimes,
Right,
you know.
sure.
And a good editor knows what you're trying to do and helps you find a way to smooth out some of the rough patches to make it happen. Anyway, so I digress. But so I send my outline to the editor. We get that into shape. Then I write a draft of the script, send it to the editor. Maybe 2 or 3 drafts. We get that into shape. So it's like when I worked at DC and I'd get a script. It's like you're shooting script, and that's what goes to the director, and you make the damn movie. And that's one thing that Kubert, ground into us is this is a story. Your job is to tell that story that's been written there for you. Your job is not to take that story and use that as a vehicle to express your own ideas and the pictures that you want to draw. That's not what this job is. That's a thing to do, but it's not what we do when we're telling comic books. So that's the aesthetic that I grew up with. And Trekker, how can I put this? I know how much story that I have to tell to get Mercy to that angle of repose place that I wanted to get to. I talked about where the series can come to a good, hopefully satisfying for readers that have been sticking with me for over 3 decades, a resting point that will feel satisfying. I know how much story I need to tell to get there. I can't afford to waste a page. I can't afford to just be making it up as I go along and say, I guess that was an interesting little diversion, but now we got to get back to the main story. And my story, I want it to be, it's just got to, I've got to make sure that I've got the roadmap down clear and it keeps moving forward at a substantial rate. And I don't have the confidence that I could trust my instinct well enough to do that without having a pretty good outline for where I'm going. So I've got an outline for the series, and then I do the story for each story where I know where that's going. As I'm laying out the story, penciling the story, inking it, I will go back and I will change dialogue. I'll sometimes add panels or something like that. If I've seen something on a TV show, or I've read a comic book and I said, oh, that's a cool thing. I should put that in. I can fit that in this story. By God, I can. I just need to shift some furniture around and make it work. So it's flexible enough that I can allow for moments of inspiration to come along at almost any stage.
Sure.
But basically, I've got a script and I know what that script is supposed to do, and I just want to do it as well as possible. In the past, I would draw an issue sometimes for DC, and I'd say, I'm not sure why this story exists, other than they need to put out 22 or 24 pages of this character this month.
Content.
Yeah.
Just
They just need to.
content.
They're
It's
just
not art.
generating. Yeah, they're generating content. They're not really generating a story that has a reason to live and breathe, so to speak. So, with Trekker, each story is there for a damn good reason. I'm not just lollygagging around as as they would have said 50 or 60 years ago. So yeah, it's important to me to have that script solid for me. Yeah.
Awesome. That's some great stuff. Listen, I mean, and the point of, so it's such an important thing that I don't think that enough people take the art of making a comic, a sequential art story, seriously enough. There are too often, and I can tell you off the top of my head at least 5 examples in the last 10 years where I've read a comic book and I go across the top tier and I get to the end of the second panel and I go to the back to the second tier on the left side, but and then I go over and I realize that next tier crosses the crease.
Yeah.
But the top tier the top tier crosses the crease too. It's a 2-page paneled spread, but the top tier has a panel that ends at the crease.
Right at the crease, yeah. So again, which way is the reader supposed to go?
Well, I've now stopped reading the story. I've now had to stop and had to figure out where I go next.
You're trying to solve a visual puzzle rather than getting immersed into a story. I totally get it. And part of the reason for that might be that when it's done well, like anything that's done with mastery, it feels effortless. Oh, that's easy. Anybody can do that. It's like you watch Jimi Hendrix play a guitar solo. It doesn't look like he's working at all. He just picked up the guitar and he's just farting around on that damn thing. So I guess I'll make a comic book because but there are years and years and years of craft and study and blood, sweat, and tears that go into becoming really good at this, so that all that work doesn't show consciously. So it's a whole thing, and it's
it's important, and I appreciate the work you do. That's one of the things. One of the things we do here is talking about, when we talk about craft and we talk about process and we talk about those things. It's important to know, because it's important to know that this story that is right here. This book, whatever book it is that I bought like too many of last week, and it's not just something that people throw together. It's not haphazardly. Your fanfic words that throw across a page. And if it's successful and if it's good, like Trekker, then it's because people are paying attention to what they're doing.
Yeah. And Dave, you were going to say something, I thought. Dave, were you?
No.
Okay.
You're doing great.
Well, I
appreciate all your work. Yes.
Thanks. I was just going to say that I'm going to have to try to be really careful in the way I say this, but a thing about Kickstarter that I've come to realize is that Kickstarter is set up really well to let you make a pitch. And what I mean by that is you can design a Kickstarter campaign where there are a few eye-catching images and a cool sounding concept for a story. And you will get a lot of people to give you a lot of people to give you a lot of money based on that. And that's one skill set. That's presenting your idea in a compelling way so that people get excited about it and want to know more. That's a huge skill to have. It's a completely different skill set than telling the story. And the reason I'm saying this is because I've backed a lot of Kickstarter campaigns myself. And for anybody out there who's thinking about doing a Kickstarter,
you do.
The first bit of advice that I give to anybody is back as many Kickstarters as you possibly can, especially Kickstarters that have something in common with you and what you want to do. You just learn so much that way. But anyway, so I backed a lot of campaigns thinking, this looks pretty cool. It's sort of somehow in the same area of comics making that Trekker is. Maybe it's, we can learn from each other, whatever. But many times I then get the book and I read a page or two and they just aren't executing the story well. I'm not drawn into the story. They're not establishing a character that comes alive to me. It might very well be a character that this creator has had living in their head for years, so they get it, and then they use the shorthand on the pages, but it isn't pulling me into the story. And I don't know what the solution for anybody is in doing that. Again, finding an editor who can say, I don't know why I should care about this character. I don't know what's going on in this panel, or why from this panel, then you go to there and you've lost me. Those basic things that are just crucial if you want to do this, as Dave was saying, as an art. It's as a communication, as an art of communication. It's an art of telling a story, and it's about selecting the right details and guiding your reader through it. The reader has to feel confident and put themselves in your hands so that they can relax and not worry about whether or not they're going to get lost in the story. You just want them to sink into that story. There was a great musician who said, when I go up on the stage, I want right away to let the audience know that they're safe with me, that I know what I'm doing up here, and I'm not going to get lost in the middle of the song, so they can just sit there and enjoy the evening. They can get into the songs and go on this journey with me, and I'm not going to screw it up. And so when I get a comic book and I crack it open and I read that first page or two, and it's just solid, then I sort of I just ease up.
Yeah, sure.
And then I could just take that ride with them. That's what you want, I think.
Yeah, I was just looking. So I've backed 236 Kickstarters since 2016.
Woo!
So I didn't realize.
So you must be ready to run your own now, then.
Well versed.
Maybe stay tuned in 2024.
Yep. Oh, okay, cool.
But anyway, I think we need to wrap up, and I hate that, but we've had such a wonderful time, Ron. I'm sorry we haven't done this sooner, and I can't wait to do it again. David, thank you so much for being here, for filling in. We'd love to have you back another time. You are our go-to fill-in for now.
Okay, cool.
And like I said, for all the people watching, we are going to have a show next week. I hope. Well, we are, but I have some ideas about it. We'll let you know in the next day or two. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, or make sure you follow us on Facebook or on Twitch if you're following us there. Thank you for being here, Ron. We really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Everyone,
My
go
pleasure.
back, Trekker. Check out. You can watch us. Go back and check out anything you missed if you came in late. They'll be up and available on those platforms, and the links to both David and Ron's Kickstarters are in the chat. So grab those. Make sure you back them. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Bob.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
This has been a production of the Pop Culture Squad Network. PopCultureSquad.com. How do you nerd?